So this time, guys, we're going to talk about how to get your file from Lightroom and export it so that you can use that file for Instagram, the internet, email, for whatever, for everything, right? We're going to mostly be exporting it as a JPEG. So last week, if you missed it, we learned how to import a file and we learned how Lightroom works. This week, we're going to focus on how you export that file so that you can use it for your devices. So if you're ready, let's go. Okay everyone, so as promised, this week we are going to show you how to export the photo. So we learned how to import it last week and we learned what Lightroom is. It basically keeps all your files where they are and allows you to make changes. Meanwhile, it's just making a list of the changes you've made. So I've done some quick edits, just kind of drag some sliders around. And let's live in a temporary hypothetical world where this is an absolute masterpiece. We are ready to export it. We are ready to put this on Instagram and share it with our whole world, right? So all we have to do is go up to File, just like we did when we imported, but rather than go to Import, we're going to come down to Export. And we click that, and you're going to see a list. Now, all these user presets are ones I've made. Yours is going to default. There's some Lightroom ones, but I would suggest making a new one. So I don't honestly remember how it starts for the very first time you ever load it, but that's all right. We'll just pick a random one here. We'll start from the top, and we're going to work our way down. Actually, I'm going to do the full res version. So you can see I have a 2K, a 5K, 10K. That's my resolution. I've set these all as presets so that I can quickly access one if I want it to be a certain version. You don't need to worry about that just yet. We're going to probably make our first preset a full resolution preset. So that's what I recommend you do as well. So the way you're going to do that is you'll have all these options. You're going to want to choose where it exports to. I export to my desktop personally. You maybe want to export to your external hard drive or your photos folder, wherever, but you want to set that first. You have the option to export it into a subfolder. So I export it into one called JPEGs because the file start as RAW and I like to keep both the RAW and the JPEG. So that's my personal process, but you can turn that off entirely or you can name it, whatever you want to name it. Temp. And you can add to a catalog. We're not going to get into the cataloging features of this just yet. I actually don't use the cataloging feature at all, to be honest. A lot of people do. Existing files, ask what to do is the best option. Otherwise, it might overwrite without warning. You definitely don't want that. You don't want to just skip. You want to make that decision. Sometimes you might want to overwrite. Sometimes you might want to create a secondary copy. So ask what to do is the best setting there. File naming is just what it sounds like. You can choose to rename it. So if this particular file, for example, we'll come out of here for a second. And this file was called ADM02757. Now, if I wanted to call it Sunset on the Beach, I could choose that. However, because this is going to be our, where'd my full resolution go? Because this is going to be our full resolution default, we probably don't want to rename it because not everything's going to get the same name, but maybe you have a convention. Maybe you want to rename it, Atoms. And every file from here on out will be called Atoms 1, Atoms 2, Atoms 3. I wouldn't suggest it though. I would just leave that off for now. You'll probably want to keep your RAWs and your JPEGs, so it's good if those file names are the same. That'll make it much easier for you in the future. So I recommend leaving that. Video we won't get into just yet. That will be a completely different, a whole different YouTube channel really. File settings is the important one. So you have a lot of options, but if you want to do anything with this on the internet, on Instagram, anywhere else, it's JPEG. The rest of these have their time and place, but if you don't know why you're exporting to one of these, then you shouldn't be exporting to one of these. That's the easy way to talk about it. If you don't need a TIFF, don't export to a TIFF. And if you do need a TIFF, then you probably understand why you need a TIFF, and you'll know when to click that. But for the most part, full res JPEGs are what we're after. That's what allows us to do something with our file. That allows us to print it, to move it to the internet, whatever. There is some debate on these. You're not here for a lesson in color space and physics and retina displays and all that. Leave it on sRGB unless you know why you're changing it. Otherwise, if you're not sure what that means and if you don't feel like researching it, just know that sRGB will be fine, your colors will stay true, and you'll be sweet. Quality, I would leave it 100 for our full res. The only time I ever come down on quality, honestly, is if I'm afraid of that photo being stolen. So for example, if I'm sending it to a tourism board we've worked with as a sample to see if they would like to buy it or use it or whatever, I might limit the quality there so that they don't have a full res version that they can use. And then the other option is to limit the file size. Now on the full resolution one we're making now, we don't want to click that at all because we want full resolution. But if, for example, I want it on my blog, you don't want to upload this massive file to your website because then it's going to take forever to load. So what we would do in this case is we would limit the file size. And for example, the blog, I think 450 is about where I limit mine. So I just type that in there. That's a pretty small compressed file. It looks fine on most screens, but you wouldn't want to print it, and that's exactly what I'm going for. But for your full res, leave that off. You want the maximum quality you can get. I recommend having all of your photos that you love, export a full res version, and then you can also export, you see I have blog versions and Facebook versions and all sorts of other things. So the next thing is image sizing. Same story. We don't want to resize the image. We want this at full size, at full resolution. So we're going to leave that just as it is. If we did, like for example, again, the blog, there's no reason to have it bigger than, I think, about 1400 width. So I can type in 1400. I can get rid of the height, and that way it will maintain the same aspect ratio that it was shot with, or I can reassign it to whatever I want. But for the full resolution, again, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to leave that off. And resolution, I recommend for your full resolution default 300. Again, you don't need to get into the science and all that during this video. If you want to look into that, you're welcome to. Suffice to say, if you're printing your photos, that's a good resolution to have them at. And these are going to be my master copy JPEGs, these full resolution ones. So I want lots of resolution. Last thing, one of the last things is your metadata. That is this information here. So your shutter speed, your location, your ISO, all that stuff, it all falls into metadata. So I keep that exported so that I can reference it later. But you have different options such as only copyright. That's kind of up to you. I don't see a very compelling reason to ever turn that off, but maybe you'll run into one. Watermarking, obviously that's if you want to put something on top of your image to protect it. For your full resolution, do not, because you can always come in and re-export one with a watermark another time. But if you export your full res JPEG with the watermark, you can't undo that. You can't get rid of that. So yeah, leave that blank. Last thing is after export. So if you want to, say, open that photo in Adobe Photoshop after it's been exported, you can do that. I choose to do nothing. When it's exported, I'm happy, I'm done. So that's it. That is everything you need to know about exporting. So when that's all set, we just go to add, and we would type in full resi, full resolution, full res, whatever you want to type in, and you hit create. So you can see I've already got mine there, and I have a lot of variations. I'll go through a couple of these quickly with you and then take you out of here so you have better things to do. For example, full res, same folder, the exact same settings as this one, except instead of having my export to desktop, I have it to the same folder as the original. So if what I'll do is I'll actually export this for you so you can see. I'll check both of these, and I'll do a batch export, and I'm going to show you where these two files end up. And the good thing is, by the way, I'll show you that real quick as well. If we wanted to add our full resolution same folder, if you want like the setup I have, and you've already made your full resolution, just come down, change to same folder as original photo, click add again, and now you type in full res same folder, or whatever you want to call it. So it's as easy as that. You can create as many of these as you want, and I recommend they'll save you a ton of time. I never even worry about those export settings anymore because I just have everything as preset. So in my JPEG folder on my desktop, there's one version. That's the full res one. That was the default setting for a full res photo, but then I also did same folder. So the folder, if you recall from our previous session, was in this You'll Be an Expert in No Time folder. We go into there, and this was the raw. And you'll notice that now there's a folder called JPEG, and in there is our full res JPEG. And the reason for that, one more time, just to be thorough, is when we went to export in full resolution, we had desktop JPEG on this preset, and on same res, we had same folder's original photo in the subfolder JPEG. And you can see that that's exactly what it did. It created the JPEG folder and imported the JPEG version .jpg versus the raw that existed in our main folder. So that's it, guys. It's pretty easy, really. Maybe if you don't understand everything about file types, it might be a bit more complicated at first, but all in all, I think it's pretty quick to get. And the best thing is if you set up your presets right, you'll never have to think about this stuff again, just like I don't. So I hope that helped. In the next one, we're going to actually talk about how to process your photos, how to use the sliders, the real meat of Lightroom. The reason you're using it is for those sliders and to create masterpieces out of your raw photos. So we're going to start getting into that in the next one. I'll catch you there.